Welcome to Reconnecting with Wholeness, the podcast where we dive deep into the messy, beautiful journey of coming home to yourself. I'm your host, Paige, and together we'll gently question everything, bringing you deeper into self-awareness, acceptance, and trust. So take a breath, settle in, and let's begin. Hello and welcome back to Reconnecting with Wholeness. Before we really dive into today, I just want to bring awareness to the fact that I did not post last week. I did not publish a podcast, and I bring this up because I am often haunted by my own words, and maybe somebody else out there who's listening to this has the same thing, maybe not. But there was a time and day where I would have just been like, you know what, I just won't say anything and maybe nobody will notice. But the reality is that I had said in an earlier podcast that my commitment was to post weekly from April to August for this season, and I missed last week. And at the same time, I also want to say that I am a person who really is sometimes forced, sometimes by myself, sometimes by something greater that comes along, but really forced to walk my talk and the things that I say. And I get, fortunately or unfortunately, initiations, and if I'm going to host a grief ceremony, then you know that I'm going to be experiencing grief leading up to that. If I'm going to hold any sort of event, workshop, program, I have done it and been walked through it, and that's just part of how this works for me. And I say that to say, we've been talking about the nervous system, and as I was kind of reflecting, I was thinking, I really, not that my nervous system was all over the place, but I really wasn't in a space to talk about the nervous system the way that I should, could, want to, all of that. So anyway, with that being said, and just kind of my own personal note added in here, we are going to continue talking about the nervous system today. I'm going to give some actual modalities that we're going to talk about for nervous system. Now, I want to be really, really clear that my goal for this is twofold, right? One is to make sure that we're using these modalities, these tools, whatever you want to call them, as an opportunity to stay present. The goal is not to bypass or shut down our nervous system, and I'll talk about that probably a little more as we actually go through these. And goal number 2 was just with me. That's what I was going to say. Goal number 2 is to really get our nervous system down to a place where we actually are able to feel safe enough to finish that nervous system response or loop. Because what can happen is if we are constantly, I'm going to say on edge, right? And so to use an example, let's just say at home, you either as a child or even currently, right? You have maybe a partner or a family member or somebody in your house who's kind of always on edge, right? You never really know how to read them. You never know when they're going to, whether that's verbally explode or slam cabinets or whatever. That can feel, yes, dysregulating, but it can affect our nervous system. And so that fight or flight response is kind of always up because we don't know when something's going to happen. So we kind of stay in this hyper aware state. I've seen the same thing with people with work, right? Whether you have a physical office that you go to and you work certain hours, or whether that gets pushed a little bit, there's kind of this on call that can affect that nervous system response, right? Or even if you're not on call, then say, okay, well, I worked from this time to this time, but I'm still carrying that energy home, right? I'm still thinking about it. I'm still stressed out. I'm still overwhelmed by this situation that's going on at work. Now, that might just feel to you like it's a situation that's going on at work, but really it is that like nervous system response where you're not able to come back to homeostasis. You're not able to come back to that safety. And when we live in that for a prolonged period of time, our nervous system really just becomes like more tolerant of this like high stress state, right? Like that never really comes off. And as we talked about last week, right, like safety is foundational, and the way that we begin to heal is through safety. And so when I'm talking about some of these modalities, I'm really utilizing this as a doorway to be able to get your body into a place to do the work. Now, that doesn't mean that some of these aren't also avenues of doing the work. I almost like want to caution you in this. The hard part is for me, I know that there is a variety of people listening, and some of you maybe haven't done any nervous system work, maybe some of you have, maybe some of you already have a safe place. And so to really kind of like cover my bases, I just want to make sure that everybody's kind of on the same page as to what my intention is, which is to utilize these as a place to do the work. To get our body to a place where we've been able to do the work. But then also, if you haven't done any of the work before, really allowing yourself to be held by somebody, by a practitioner. And maybe they use some of these and maybe they don't. And I use practitioner loosely, whether that's, a therapist or a coach or a healer or, I don't know, whoever else. So, yeah, that's where I'm going to end that. So now I'll start to actually dive into the meat of today. So I think I had maybe said this in an earlier post talking about the nervous system, but maybe not. So I'm going to say it again. We typically think of regulation as calming down, and that's partially true, right? It's kind of one of those incomplete pictures, because right now as a society what we have is a lot of people have such a nervous system that's living in kind of this chronic state of stress. And so yeah, sometimes it's about calming down, but really it's about flexibility. Really it's about being able to move through those dangers and then coming back to safety and back to danger in the appropriate moments. Too many times what we're seeing, and I think part of it's because we don't have that high of a trauma-informed community, we don't really understand how different things affect the nervous system, how the nervous system gets rewired, that we really end up getting stuck in these loops. And so sometimes, unfortunately, the way to also get us out of those loops is to kind of reactivate it. And again, I'm not currently saying that you should use these modalities to close any loops. I'm just simply saying let's get our body in a place where we're ready to. But ultimately what we want is to be able to finish that stress cycle, because otherwise it just kind of keeps building. It's like our nervous system is kind of like an elevator where we can keep going up, but at some point you are supposed to come back down. And if we don't, then you're only going to move up, right? And so if our baseline, let's just say, is ground floor, that's where we want to come back to, so that way when we're in danger, we can move up to our second or third floor and then come back down to the first. And instead, what tends to happen, because we don't allow ourselves to finish these cycles, is that we move up from the first floor to the second floor, and then something else happens, and we move from the second floor to the third floor, and then something else happens, and we move from the third to the fourth, and never come back down to that ground level. So I like to just, again, I feel like I'm repeating myself a lot today, so I'm not going to apologize for it. Skip through this part, I don't know. But we are looking to just at least take the body down a little bit, even if we're not completely closing some of those stress cycles. Hope that makes sense. Anyway, we are going to talk about some different modalities here. So some of these are down-regulating, some of these are activating, right? So down-regulating meaning it activates that parasympathetic response, that rest or digest. Some of them are activating in the sense that it activates that fight or flight response, that sympathetic nervous system, and some of them can do both, depending on how you use it. So I will, as I go through these, I will go through if they're down-regulating, up-regulating, activating, or if they're kind of interchangeable. So slow breathing is one for activating that parasympathetic. Now, breath work in general is kind of a very, I almost want to say like a vague term, because it's really anything that deals with breath. And yet we have like breath work practitioners, but then we also have people who like do breath work that maybe is also integrated into something else. So for example, I did Kundalini yoga. It's been a few years since I've done it, but that was one of the kind of first things that I was introduced to, and that has a fair amount of breath work in it, and it's a different types of breath. So when you're looking to calm the nervous system, we're looking for some sort of slow breathing. Now this could be box breathing, where it's like, say a count of 4, that you inhale, you hold, exhale for a count of 4, hold that exhale out for a count of 4. You also can do just like deep inhale and then a longer exhale. So count of 4 in for the inhale and a count of 6 for the exhale. You don't have to count if you don't want to, but that's going to be a breath work that's going to activate that parasympathetic, that rest or digest state. I want to kind of throw in a cautionary tale, and this is what I was talking about earlier, as far as just ensure that whatever modality you're using, you're allowing yourself to remain present. Because the idea isn't that we get really upset and angry and we want to take in some deep breaths to suppress that anger or whatever's going on. The idea is that we want to be able to stay present with that anger, to be able to communicate what it is from a grounded place that's bothering us, upsetting us, hurting us, the boundary that was crossed, etc. Now, on the flip side of this, there is breath work that does activate. That's faster breath work. That's more like the breath of fire, which is very quick inhale and exhale. I think that's the only one that I'm going to talk about. But there are quite a few breaths that can activate that system. And so I would just say, if you're familiar enough with breath work, or if you go to a breath work facilitator or anything like that, and you use kind of one of those like faster breaths, just know and pay attention to yourself and know that if it becomes too much, you can slow it down, you can change it. The same thing goes for even slow breathing. Like I do have a note here that holding breath, if you have a history of trauma, might not be the best thing for you. And so just really stay in tune with yourself, and if something becomes too much, then you can stop. Okay, other down-regulating sound. So whether this is some sort of like sound bath, singing bowls, humming, chanting, when we do internal, like humming and chanting, it vibrates the vagus nerve. It also vibrates like vocal cords, so it can do a lot of like throat chakra opening. But really, when we do humming or singing, it's the only time that our body actually is able to like vibrate from the inside out. So that's a good one. You can choose sounds intuitively. It's not like you have to like hum any particular song. I'm going to say like humming and chanting are always fair game. When it comes to like singing bowls or other sound, I would just, again, like caution, because I think I'm probably one of the only people who's going to be like, hey, maybe this is a time where you don't want to use it. But when you talk about like sound bath, while yes, it is supposed to be overall down regulating and it moves us into altered states of consciousness and altered brainwaves, it also can create some level of anxiety, or it can open us up to finish that loop. I actually had that happen with a client of mine for a sound bath that I just recently did, where there was one particular instrument where she was like, I felt like normally it's calming, but today for whatever reason, like it felt like it was gonna, I was just feeling really anxious. If you have any sort of like auditory processing, sensory issues, dysfunctions, just dislikes, that's going to be another one where I'm going to say like, probably don't go to a sound bath first, like check out different instruments, see how you do with those. Yeah, for now that feels good. Gentle somatics, yoga, this promotes like embodiment and present moment awareness, and so it's good to just really bring that awareness into the body. It can slow us down. That being said, I feel like sometimes if people are constantly in our head, and I'm just going to throw this out from my own personal experience, so do with it what you will. Sometimes yoga is good enough to say, like, yes, this brings me into my body, and sometimes it can also help stimulate your mind, because a lot of times I think that happens from a inability to turn the mind off, right? And yoga, especially if it's gentle, like it kind of like gives us that ability to come back to the body of like, oh, like this is what it feels like to stretch this muscle, or this is where I feel discomfort, right? And simultaneously, just because it allows for that doesn't mean that everybody's going to have that same experience. So you might go through a yoga class and be like, man, I didn't feel anything, and instead I was thinking about all of the things that I should have been doing, right? That's probably not going to feel that helpful for you. So just knowledge and awareness. Dry needling and acupuncture. I don't know as much about acupuncture, so I'm not going to talk about it in comparison to dry needling. I will just say that I know that acupuncture follows like the Chinese meridians, so it's more about energetic flow, whereas dry needling is more from like a muscular body perspective. But the clinic that I worked at, I didn't because I wasn't a practitioner, but we offered dry needling, and so it's great for like muscle contraction. It is really great for that like parasympathetic nervous system activation of just, it kind of offers like a reset is what I would say. So if you've had like some sort of emotional suppression, if you have stored stress in the body, if you just aren't in pain, then dry needling is a great thing to do. Preferably somebody who knows and has some level of trauma awareness. And also, I would say, like, if you're afraid of needles, then maybe don't jump into dry needling. Although I will say, when I've done like nervous system resets, typically you're like on your stomach and they work on the spine, so it's not like you're seeing anything. But still, if needles freak you out, I just say like honor that. touch-based tools, so massage, weighted blankets. This could be tapping of the chest. This could also be like cupping. This creates calm through physical safety cues. So it really activates, I'm going to say, like that bodily safety, and can help, kind of like what I was saying with yoga, right? Like it can help us like really just come back into the body. It also can like create that safety through touch. So even though like a weighted blanket, it's not necessarily, that's not what I meant to say. I meant through connection, not through touch. But kind of like a weighted blanket, while that might not be another person, right? It feels like there's some sort of connection there. Massage, obviously, like there is another person. So yeah, just again, using the physical body. Okay, so some modalities that activate that sympathetic fight or flight response, as we talked about, one of those is like fast, strong breaths, like breath of fire. Also, cold exposure or contrast showers. Now, I actually recently did contrast therapy, and that was like an incredible nervous system reset for me. I'm not going to say that it's going to be that way for everybody, but this does activate like that sympathetic response. It builds regulation and capacity as long as it's followed by like times of rest. And now, just because I did like contrast therapy, which it was a 2-hour cycling between heat and cold, so they had like saunas and cold plunges, and so you cycled between the two. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you have to do. You can start with cold exposure just by like 10 seconds of cold water on your face, or turning your shower to cold before you get out or when you first get in. This is good for like helping if you like feel stagnant or depressed. This kind of like wakes up that response. Again, I'm also going to say, like, if you were to do like a contrast therapy session, kind of like what I did versus just like cold exposure of like 10 seconds on a splash of the face, right? Just be cautious of like disassociating, because again, the thing we aren't looking to do is to like suppress that nervous system. It's to be able to like stay present through it, right? So even, and I mean, really this is true for all of the modalities that I've discussed, or, so far, but like, can you still say like, what are your sensations in the body? Like I was talking to my husband about the contrast therapy that I did, and I like got in the first tub and literally just like stood in it, and almost immediately my feet felt like they were going numb, and I was like, okay. And so I stayed in there for a little bit longer and then got out and came back at a later point in time, right? So even just like having those like physical sensations that we can kind of try to anchor to, so that way mentally we're not disassociating, and yet at the same time, my own personal experience with contrast therapy is it like gets you so into the body so quickly that you really don't have it. Like, to me, it like silenced all of the mental chatter and was just like plummeted me into the body. So, however, again, proceed at your own comfort level. Cardio, shaking, dancing, this is another one. It really helps like mobilize the energy, and so it helps complete those stress cycles. If you think about it from the component of, we have a fight response, and even though you might not always have that fight response activated, right, that idea, the sensation behind it, right, is to move, to get out of the situation that you're in. But maybe you can't do that, right? Like maybe you're at work and you can't just like run away, or you can't like punch your coworker, obviously, right? If you then take cardio, dancing, shaking, something of that nature, right, and move it outside of that, then it helps just take that irritation, and like you're giving it a home, I guess, right? You're taking that like fight or flight energy and putting it somewhere, which helps signal your body like, oh, okay, I'm out of that situation, even though you're running at 6 o'clock the next morning or whatever it is that you're doing. Some other kind of more adaptive modalities, adaptive in the sense that they can kind of go back and forth depending on the intention. EFT tapping, I love it. I've talked about it before. It does help balance the nervous system. It's good for when you have like emotional reactivity or any sort of like internal conflict, looping thoughts. I guess I would say that I've had it like activating in the sense that it can bring emotional patterns to the surface. Part of the way that tapping works is like if you don't really believe something, then it's not going to do anything for you if you're saying that while tapping. And I say this because I know some people who do like group tappings, and so they'll have whoever's there for the group put in what are their thoughts around whatever, right? Whether that's worthiness or money, abundance, shame, all of that. And sometimes you are tapping and you're like, yep, okay, like don't feel anything. And then there's a statement that gets made that you repeat that causes you to start to cry and have some sort of an emotional outlet. That's because somewhere in your body, like that rang true, and it like, whether you want to say struck a chord, hit a nerve. So I have experienced that, but I have not personally experienced a like a moment of panic in the midst, or like a moment of anxiety in the midst of my tapping outside of anything that I was already anxious, you know? However, it can also be downregulating, of course. So it can be really calming to the nervous system. Like I said, it definitely can bring up like subconscious beliefs that you didn't know that you had. Meditation and mindfulness. Now, overall, meditation is typically considered, I would say, as downregulating. And at the same time, I know that it can be frustrating for people if you do have like a really active mind. It can also be dysregulating for somebody if you are somebody who doesn't feel like stillness is safe, right? Because that's part of the idea behind meditation, is that we're getting to a point, hopefully, right, where there's some level of stillness. I typically recommend, for anybody who hasn't already done meditation, or if you're just starting out, do guided meditations. They're going to be easier. They give you some sort of like a structure to follow, and typically they have some sort of focus, something to focus on, something to like anchor you to, right? Whether that's body or breath or, imagery. And you can also do like eyes open meditations if you want to. I typically don't. You can do like moving meditations. I don't know anybody personally who like does moving meditations, but I do know when I was doing my sound healing that I had one particular teacher who he talked about. He was like, I prefer actually to do like sound baths where people are moving, and there's some sort of, it doesn't have to be like dancing, but where they actually like stand and move throughout it. So I do know that, as always, like, moving is an option, even if it's just like really simple, like side to side. I guess I have done moving meditations in Kundalini yoga, so I should take back what I said earlier. Of course, nature exposure. Now, I have, to me, nature is always calming, but knowing kind of like what what if there is a location that is like most calming to you, but it does send safe signals to the nervous system and like helps you co-regulate with natural rhythms. Of course, like this is also part of like the circadian rhythm, right? Like it's part of the reason why sometimes if you work on night shift, it doesn't help stress responses, right? Because like you get off cycle with nature in the way that it was intended. But, of course you can do that bare feet on the earth. You can do like go to the forest, ocean, water, whatever, but really like just getting outside. Ideally away from technology, as crazy as that is in this day and age. And then like sensory anchoring. I've had some people who've used this in really, really tough times where whether it's sensory anchoring into a specific sense of like smell, texture, sight, sound, or I'm not going to remember exactly what it was, but like 5 things that you hear, 4 things that you see, 3 things that I wish I could remember what it was. It didn't do all of the senses, but it did something along that line, right? Of like, again, bringing back into like the physical surrounding. So even if you can just say like, okay, like here are 5 things that I see, and here are 4 things that I can touch, and here are 3 things that I can hear, to really help bring you back. And that's all I have for my like original list. I will say for like meditation, there's various types, whether it's like, guided journeys or hypnosis or like just regular straight meditation. There's a lot of different ways to express each of these things. Even like I said with breath work, right? Like you can do slow breaths, you can do a lot of different types of breaths. I've actually, as I was thinking about it, I have experienced a slow breath in a Kundalini yoga that was an activating. So just really, whether you want to play around with it, whether as I was going through this list, you were like, oh, this sounds like something that I would really enjoy. Great, try that. And if you already have things that help your nervous system, then great, do that too. Yeah, with that, I feel pretty complete. I don't really have anything else to say. I thank you all for tuning in to listen to me, and I hope you have an incredible week. Thanks for joining me today on Reconnecting with Wholeness. I invite you to take what resonated and explore how it shows up in your own life. Keep in mind, even the smallest shifts can spark transformation. If today's episode felt valuable for you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share it, leave a review, or connect with me on social media. Until next time, keep exploring, keep feeling, and keep reconnecting with the wholeness that's already within you. Take care, and I'll see you in the next episode.